Hey, what's up, everybody? Infamous back here with battleofthebuild.com, talking about the deep dive from the developer. This is the deep dive, a developer deep dive. Let's talk about class identity. And of course, this was posted on September 26, 2019. Kind of interestingly, the video that I posted, the ESO play as you want, killing ESO, I posted that on the 25th. Very interestingly, that this, of course, came out on the 26th, the very next day. But in excuse me, in actuality, this was probably long in the making. As I've said, as I've said numerous times, that this wasn't the first time I've had brought this discussion up about the play as you want model of ESO, or I should say what they push as, you know, the play as you want in their advertising that they do a lot. As you can see right here, this is one of our mantras for ESOs, is to play as you want. And in this case, it means that any class can fulfill any role, whether it's tank, DPS, support, healer. Is to better achieve this ideal while also maintaining the unique fantasy flavor of each class, all class kits need to include the basic tools required to fill each role. To be clear, our goal is for every class to be viable, not necessarily optimal. And this is something that should have been stated years ago. This is something that should have been stated at the very inception of the game, to let players know that yes, you can be viable in all roles, but that does not mean that you will be able to fulfill that role optimally. And this would have saved them a lot of development time, where they went back and forth, flip-flopping and removing options from one class to give it to another class to make it very viable. In terms of healing, one of the things that you'll notice is, for example, with the coming patch, is that they buffed the amount of healing that sorcerers can do. Like I said before in my previous video, where people would complain, oh, like, you're buffing Templars, because Templars are complaining, well, why can't we do as much damage as Magica sorcerers? So what happens next? Now, since the Magica sorcerers are basically doing the same amount of damage as the Templars, but the Templars have these OP heals, because that's what the class was designed for. It was designed around being a very optimal healer. So now you have this class of optimal healers saying, we want to be more than viable in PvE and game. We want to be optimal, just like the Magica sorcs are optimal when it comes to how much damage that they do. We're not satisfied with being viable. So what do? They upped the amount of damage that Templars can do, and so now both Magica Templars and Magica sorcerers are very optimal classes, but sorcerers are not optimal healers. They are viable healers, but they're not optimal healers. And so for the next patch, you're seeing that they are increasing the amount of healing that the matriarch can do by something like 50%. And in no CP, my no CP build, the heal is around 7,000, which means that heal is going to be around 11,000. But it doesn't just heal just one person. It heals the matriarch, it heals the caster, and as well as an additional person. Or it's a smart heal, so it'll just heal. It's a guaranteed heal on the matriarch, and then it's a guaranteed heal for another 2 players. So in essence, for the cost of 3k Magica, it's actually putting out 30,000 in healing. And this is what happens when players who are just viable in a certain role push the developers to be optimal. So what they're discussing basically in the deep dive here, and talking about the difference between the power fantasy of a character, and basically what this is referring to is just basically the immersion of the role. Like he says here, that Templars call upon the power of the light and the burning sun, and that Dragon Knights come with bringing flames and fire. This is just the immersion of the actual character, the kind of the design behind it. One character revolves around stealth, like the Nightblade. You've got the shock, the electricity of the Magica sorcerer. You've got the flare and the nature of the warden class, etc. But what they say right here is that this power fantasy, this immersion, this role play, It says, however, should not dictate or constrain your character's role in battle. And basically, what this should mean is that, yes, while we have an immersion, a sort of fantasy behind these characters, is that we still want these characters to play and fulfill in a certain role, right? It doesn't mean that you're going to be stuck playing a warden and you can only play that warden, as a healer. You can only play the DK as a tank. You can only play, your Templar as a healer. You can only play sorcerer, as a wizard caster sort of class. But at the same time, what it also says, what the developers are also saying, is that it does not mean that you will be picked as the most optimal choice, and that's okay. And that's okay. There's nothing saying that you have to be the most optimal pick for specific roles, especially when it comes to endgame, high endgame PvE content. If people are wanting to test how optimal their builds are, they're going to want to go with the most optimal roles. With that said, ESO should have actually done this a very, very long time ago, in which they had made this very statement, because the forums are constantly filled with nerf this, buff me, make me stronger. I'm a warden. I want to be on par with casting like a magic sorcerer. The reason being is because if everybody is optimal, if everybody is in essence optimal in what they do, then all you're basically doing is picking a skin, because then it becomes irrelevant which class you play, because then all you're doing is you're picking a skin and you're picking the animations. Basically everything else is all homogenized. And then it really doesn't matter who you pick, because we all do the same damage. We all have the same functions. We all do the same type of healing. We all have burst heals. We all have the burst damage. All the values, all the values of everything is the same. But the problem is that the ESO developers, although they make statements like this, they don't live up to them, which is the primary problem. ESO developers make statements that they want to, for example, they want to focus on, for this patch, they said that we were going to be focusing on, DK, Warden, and Necromancer. And yet we see the stripping of all of these characters in terms of making them all equal through the ruining of the damage over time abilities, which primarily affects the Magic of DK's ability to bring Flame and Fury, because that basically got nerfed because everybody wanted dots. And so the optimal Magic Dragon Knight and the Dragon Knight class that is designed around optimally dealing damage over time versus many of the class comparisons, which are more about dealing burst damage, and the DK being more about an attrition class that got ruined because of the desire of everybody to be optimal in their ability to deal damage over time. And the sad part is that it was the developers' fault for, in essence, listening to their player base, and of course wasting good amounts of money and development time, having to now revert all of the dot changes that they initiated in Scalebreaker to then subsequently nerf all of those changes in the coming DLC Dragonhold. So it's important that if you are going to make statements like this, that you actually live up to them, and stating and being firm that while yes, we want our classes to all be viables, whether you want to be a DPS, which you can. I've created a wide variety of builds showcasing on Battle of the Build that a lot of the classes can be played in all sorts of various roles. For example, you can look at my Necromancer builds. I've created a Sword and Shield heavy armor build for PvP. I've created another Sword and Shield for a more tank buffer defensive role. I've created a Magicka Necromancer that can heal effectively. Created a Brawler Necromancer. I've created a medium armored, very high mobile burst necromancer, and I've created a utility, more of a disruptor tank, and then of course, where was it? I think that was it. It's like 8, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 builds for this class, and of course, the same thing can be said for Magicka DKs. I've created numerous Magicka DKs from a Sword and Shield Magicka build, the two-handed, the hybrid DK that can take advantage of both stamina and magic abilities, the medium armored, highly mobile with lots of resource management, Tava's champion. So it can be done, and these builds can be optimized for certain roles, but it doesn't mean that they'll be viable in every sort of gameplay. Now, the reason being that I bring this up is because hopefully ESO developers will finally decide to make a change and go in a different route than the way that they've been going.